Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Safdar. Um, right now, I am a transportation planner with GHD, which is a multinational engineering firm. I'm based out of their Toronto, Canada office. And initially, my journey started from Sargodha, where I was born. I studied in Sargodha until grade 7. After that, I went to Chandbagh School. From there, I did my O levels. Miss Asia Khawer was my O levels teacher over there. She was my teacher during grade 8 and grade 9. And after that, she we were always welcome at her place for tutorials during our toy sessions. So those of you who don't know about toy sessions, actually at our boarding school there were these sessions where students were supposed to study in the study rooms, and those study tables were actually called toys. And she was one of those few teachers who were passionate enough and who were kind enough children to come whenever they wanted if they had any kind of issues. So we were always welcome at her place. Now, after Chandbagh, I joined Lahore Grammar School, Johar Town, for my A-levels program. From there, I did my pre-engineering exams. My subjects were further mathematics, maths, chemistry, physics, and Urdu. I was passionate about Urdu literature. That's why I selected that subject. After going through my A-levels, I started applying abroad because that was my primary goal since the beginning. Some of the universities that I got invitations from were University of Toronto, University of Waterloo, University of British Columbia, and McGill University. Finally, I selected McGill University in Montreal, Canada. From there, I did my bachelor's in civil engineering. And after that, I ended up working as a transportation planner and a traffic engineer in Toronto. So I'm just waiting for the screen to load because I didn't prepare much material for today's session. It was just spur of the moment decision, and I just thought that I'll share some of my work experience with you and the decisions that eventually led me to my current role. I thought that today's session can be about how engineers perceive problems, or how do they go through with the design process in Canada and in North America, uh, because that is an interesting perspective to know what happens in an engineer's mind. This presentation actually is from one of my academic projects back at school while I was at McGill, and the project was very interesting in a way because it was about making safe a corridor, a route, a street for cyclists. And this is something that we don't see in our part of the world, because here we don't promote active transportation, and we don't promote multimodal transit. And actually, multimodal transit is the best way to live in a society, because if your children, they are going out on the streets, they're safe on the streets, parents' minds are at ease, and and it's actually good for your health, good for your mental health, and good for the street aesthetics in a way as well, and we'll see that in the presentation. So this was a group project, and the project that we did was actually in an industrial area in Montreal. For those of you who don't know, Montreal is a city in Quebec, in the French province of Quebec. Here, most of the people, they're French speaking. It's not an Anglophone area. And the area that we were working on was historically an Irish neighborhood. Canada, as you know, is a multinational country. There are people from a lot of ethnicities, and in the beginning, most of the people who were working in Canada were mostly English, Irish, Scottish, or French migrants. So this area, as you can see in the screen, um, is was along this auto route, and between this street, which is called Rue Wellington. So, as students, when our advisors gave us this project, they told us, um, you can do anything you want, but what you have to keep in mind is to give a human story to a design. So this was a new thing for us, because a design is just a design. You're told that there is this problem, you have to solve it. You're never told to go after a human story. So what they actually meant was, there were a lot of accidents happening along that route, and there was a PhD student from our university who unfortunately passed away in an accident that involved a truck and a cyclist. Uh, and that was the human story that he wanted us to focus on. So, as you can see in the slide over here, there's this ghost bike. And anywhere in Canada, if a bicyclist dies in a car accident, they just place a white cycle over there, and it's known as a ghost bike. And it's a reminder for the community and for the engineers, for the municipalities, to keep their roads safe for all the users, especially for pedestrians and the cyclists. So that was the real motivation behind our project, and that's how we started to we started to perceive the problems along the route. um, if you're an engineer in Pakistan, or you're an engineer uh, in India, or in most of the countries, even in North American countries like Houston or Dallas, your main focus is just to make the corridor efficient for cars, buses. You don't pay that much attention to cyclists or pedestrians, because you just perceive, okay, everyone has a car, everyone can go from point A to point B. But actually, if you're a good engineer, good traffic engineer, a good transportation engineer, your primary focus is to make the streets as inclusive as possible. So what we did in our design was, uh, basically we came up with the ideas uh, of how to make the street safe for cyclists, and that was to include unidirectional bicycle lanes. So unidirectional bicycle lanes, we don't see them enough in Pakistan over here, but in Canada, it's uh, it's a fairly um, it's a fairly common concept over there. So we had bicycle lanes on both sides of the roads over there, and before that, in even in Canada, there's a lot of bureaucracy. You have to explain your decisions to them, and we told them that our main motivation, like I said earlier, was safety. So how do you eliminate a hazard? How do you approach a problem? It's simply by elimination, and you substitute the hazard by putting in some engineering controls over there. And our engineering controls were basically to reduce the speed along the route, place things like removable bollards, make safe the pedestrian crossing on the street, and putting in more street lights, which is um, which is basically um, what you can say the common practice, the common engineering practice, to solve these kind of issues. But what we came up was a unique idea, because we focused on the attractiveness of the street as well. Um, if you are going through a beautiful street, visually attractive street, you will slow down. It's human behavior. You will look around. If something is pleasing to look, it automatically attracts the human eye, and basically the things that you're trying to avoid, like excessive speed, these problems automatically go away. So um, what makes a street aesthetically pleasing? the things that make it aesthetically pleasing are comfort, color, balance, calm movement, and accessibility, landscape. So, if it was an industrial area, all of these concepts were new, and basically, what our methodology was, we studied the road geometry. We did the data analysis. I will not bore you with that because those were just traffic simulations and they're a bit difficult to explain even to engineers. And after that, after doing the site analysis, we came up with certain solutions which I'm going to explain later on. So basically, one of the things that we did was we eliminated the trucks from the right driving lanes. So those of you who don't know, in Canada, we actually drive on the right side of the road as opposed to the left side of the road, like it happens in Pakistan and Europe. So when we eliminated those, especially from an industrial area, there was a lot of fighting within the municipality, within the bureaucracy, because they weren't happy that we were eliminating trucks from a driving lane. But when we explained the results to them, we actually proposed a unidirectional truck lane, and with that, what happened was that there was no conflict between trucks and the cyclists. We did that in the traffic simulation, and we proved basically that in the simulation that if the trucks are traveling in a singular lane, they are not interacting with cyclists, there will not be any accidents in the future because we're just eliminating the risk from there. And in North America, basically, we have parking lanes. So what we did was, right after the street, as you can see over here, there's a cyclist driving. There's a cyclist traveling on the unidirectional bicycle lane. So we put in a median. We didn't have enough space for the median, so we just put in removable bollards. And after that, we placed a parking lane over here. So after by doing that, we eliminated the risk for the cyclist. As you can see over here, there are removable bollards. These are the removable bollards that I was talking about. So the main thing that I wanted to focus on in this presentation is that like we go through all these steps just to make sure that our streets are inclusive for all the people. And these kind of designs, they're fairly common in North America, and we need to adopt these kind of designs here in Pakistan as well, so that our streets are more inclusive, they are more bicycle friendly, they are more pedestrian friendly, and yeah, that's just the essence of my presentation. I'm so sorry about lack of material because it was just a spur of the moment decision. But if you have any kind of questions about the projects or about what we do in Canada, about the engineering practices in Canada, please feel free to ask.
So my question was basically because you're talking about different architectural styles in terms of roads, right? So I know that there is in Netherlands, like there's a focus on cyclists in the roads, right? And then there's cities like in Barcelona, they're called walkable cities, right? So my question is, how is that planning done? You know, like what is the difference? How do you prioritize if you want your cities to be walkable or bicycle friendly?
Yeah, so if I understood it correctly, your question was how do we prioritize if we want to make a city bicycle friendly or pedestrian friendly? Was that the question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So basically, we just patch in pedestrians with cyclists, and we just call them, we just refer to both of these modes as active transportation. And at least in North America, when we are doing transportation planning steps, we we ensure that the street is safe for both of them. There's this new concept you talked about Barcelona, and there's this talk about 15-minute cities in Paris as well, where they just where the cities, the municipalities, they just decided that they wouldn't allow the regular cars on the streets, and the residents will have to either bike or they'll have to walk from one place to another place. They were allowing public transit on the streets, and it actually helped both the public transit buses, the cyclists, and the pedestrians. There weren't any accidents, and there weren't that many conflicts between the cyclists and the pedestrians. Um, Netherlands, Amsterdam is a different story because in Amsterdam, a lot of people use bicycles. Not that many people use cars. So there are a little bit of conflicts between the cyclists and the pedestrians, but they have came up with unique solutions. For example, even there are roundabouts that are specifically designed for the cyclists. So the cyclists use those roundabouts. Those roundabouts are not for cars, but for the cyclists. But that's because of the volume. When that kind of an issue comes before a transportation planner, for example, right now I'm working on the transportation master plan for the city of Niagara Falls in Canada. So first of all, we look at the data, the statistics, that how many people use the cycles, how many people just walk from place A to place B, and how many people use the cars. And then basically we use the forecast as well, that okay, if I include unidirectional bicycle lanes on the street and I make them safe, how many people are going to use them? If most of the people are coming from adjacent cities or are coming from America to Niagara Falls, there's no point of making unidirectional bicycle lanes on a particular main street. So these are kind of the decisions that transportation planner has to bear in mind before he's making his design recommendations. Uh, but as as I said earlier, at least in North America, we just patch in pedestrians with the cyclists whenever we are making these kind of decisions, and we just refer to them as active transportation.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum ji, everybody, and particularly Mr. Safdar. It's nice that you are here in Pakistan from Canada. Since I am also an engineer, first of all, how many engineers were involved in your project on rail and transit? That is my first question. And the other one is that what are the problems which are associated with rail and transit, and how real-time visibility can alleviate them? Could you kindly give your comments? Thank you.
Okay, so this project was not a rail and transit project. This was a transportation planning project. So rail and transit, they come under the umbrella of public transit, and this particular project was basically including unidirectional bicycle lanes along the street. So with this project, the city is involved. So I'll just clarify things of how management works in Canada. In Canada, cities are very independent. We have a very devolved form of government. So most of the engineering decisions that are related to public infrastructure are taken by the city governments as opposed to provincial or the federal level governments. And a public infrastructure of a particular municipality depends on basically how much budget that municipality has, how much tax they collect. So for now I'll come to the second part of your question. That was about the rail and transit issues in Canada. In the late 1990s, starting from 1980s, we had little bit of issues with traffic congestion, and that was because of the auto industry. The rail industry wasn't as popular here as it is in Europe or in Japan, where people use LRTs, they use subways, they use metros to get to point A and or to get to point A from point B. I'll just give you an example. If you take a train from Toronto to New York, it will take you 11 hours. As opposed to if you travel between London and Paris, it will just take like a couple of 5 or 6 hours. So the state of the rail and transit infrastructure in Canada was very bad. But right now, there's a lot of interest in this particular field. There are a lot of new subway lines that are being constructed. In Toronto, we are having new 11 subway lines alone, and basically that is helping us with the concept of 15-minute cities. So as I mentioned this concept earlier before, so 15-minute cities is that if you are in an old part of the city, it should only take you 15 minutes to get from point A to point B, and that's only possible with a lot of subway lines, and that's where rail and transit infrastructure comes in. So was that the answer that you were expecting? That what are the engineering practices in the rail and transit infrastructure here in Canada?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course, partly. But since you see here, when we just compare it with maybe any other country in the world, you see, because of all the terrorist activities or other mishaps which are being there, which are here in our country and in other countries too. So we have to cope up with safety and security situation also at the same time when it comes to rail and transit. So in that perspective also, I just wanted you to share your ideas.
Okay. So while I was working with some of the rail and transit teams in my previous firm, there were a lot of engineers who were there from India. So yes, we do have some security issues in Pakistan, but in India in the 90s until 2005, there were similar issues. Pakistan and India, they had similar problems. We did have a lot of terrorist activities after 9/11, but that doesn't justify the state of our rail and transit infrastructure, which is here in Pakistan, because India worked a lot on their locomotive infrastructure, and right now in Canada, a lot of engineering firms, they're working with the Indian teams who are based out of India. They are not working on basically bullet trains or light rail trains, but they are basically working on the trains that are used to transport goods from place A to place B. Basically, those trains are called freight trains, but yes, they're designed. So basically, as I was saying, that in Pakistan we did have some security issues post 9/11. But that doesn't justify the state of our public rail and transit infrastructure, because before 2000 we had similar security issues in both India and Pakistan. And I was saying that in Canada there's a lot of collaboration between the teams that are based out of the Indian offices of the engineering firms. Their design principles or their design standards for freight trains are basically they're quite good for Canada as well. We are implementing those in Canada. We are asking for the help from the Indian teams on a couple of our projects. So things can improve in Pakistan as well, but the sad thing is that we didn't change our infrastructure since the British left in 1947, at least for
Exactly.
the rail. Yeah. If India did a lot of good things for the rail infrastructure. I don't remember that politician's name who was from Bihar. I think his name was Lalu Prasad Yadav. Uh, he actually, I think he increased a lot of track kilometers to their system. And in Pakistan, we have decreased them by thousands. I remember originally my family is from Chakwal. There used to be a railway station in Chakwal. Now there are no trains going to Chakwal. The track has been removed. So these are some of the sad things that are happening in Pakistan. But on the other hand, there are some positive things as well, like the Orange Line project in Lahore. When people were criticizing, for example, the metro projects or the Orange Line, I was opposed to these kind of things, these kind of criticisms, because for metropolitan cities like Lahore, for Karachi, for Islamabad, public infrastructure is the need of the day. You need them. For example, in New York, if a CEO is working, by the way, New York has the worst public transit system in North America. Their trains date back to 140 years. They haven't changed much of the stuff. So, but still, even the CEOs take their subways. Why do they take the subways? Because it saves time. Because of the gridlock above, the traffic congestion above on the streets. It's like they just save the time and they take the trains.
Yes, that's
But
right.
we are heading
You're
in the
very
same
much.
direction, at least in Karachi and Lahore. So having
Mhm.
travel corridor or it's
Hello.
actually a good thing. I remember back in the 2000s there was a project. So there's this famous company in Canada known as Bombardier. Now they're known by the name Alstom. They had a project to have subway lines in Lahore over the Orange Line. But at that time, the government of the time vetoed that project. The same in New Delhi and in Calcutta as well. And basically, they just constructed that project for a fraction of money as opposed to the cost that are in the market today. Um, Now, for a country like Pakistan, I understand that having underground subway lines is kind of a luxury. We can't afford that. But there's another light rail vehicle which is known as light rail transit. It's actually above ground. It's not that costly, and it operates with good speed as well. Not with the speed that you would expect from a subway and an underground subway. But I think that we can implement that in cities like Karachi. But the first step for that is to have strong municipalities. If they have strong budget, they can basically fund these kind of projects.
Yes, you're very right. And thank you very, very much for all this detailed information that you have provided us with. But when it comes to, you see, shortening the time, the distance, in as you've already mentioned that it's going to take maybe not more than 15 minutes when it is moving from one place to another. So are you going in for this magnetic system, railway system, in which magnetic forces are going to act and the trains are going to fly over just like planes on the railway tracks? Is it so in the near future? I'm just talking, gathering an idea about the future as well now.
So,
Just like Japan, the Japanese trains are considered to be those are the best trains worldwide.
so bullet trains, there isn't a bullet train in North America as well, right? At the moment, I mentioned before, I gave a hint that in North America we have a very strong auto industry, and we have a very strong airline industry, and they don't want the rail industry to flourish that much. In Canada, until the 1920s, there used to be a very good rail infrastructure, but it has just decayed over the period of time. But for the future, they have certain projects like bullet train projects between cities like Chicago and New York, Toronto and Montreal, and those would be interesting to see. Like these kind of projects, they are still in the planning phases, so there's nothing concrete on the design. But
Mhm.
as you earlier said, we already have this kind of this kind of infrastructure in China, in Japan, in Europe.
Mhm.
Uh, for example, there's one company, Siemens Mobility. They're based out of Singapore and Europe, in Germany. So they have very good bullet trains. And basically, yes, their trains, they are just in the air because of the magnetic forces. There's just a space of few centimeters between the train and the railway track, and that's the basically that space gives it the agility, the speed from which it can move with the speed that it has. But having that kind of infrastructure is very, very complicated because you need a controlled environment for that. You need a loop for that. You need basically for that infrastructure, you have to construct it underground as opposed to being above ground. So there are a lot of complications with that kind of infrastructure. So in the
That's
future,
right. That's right. You are very right. Because one of my sons, he's also in Canada. He's in Toronto, and he's basically a mechanical and a civil engineer over there. He's got vast experience. And that's what he was telling me. And something else was there about the budgeting also, because of the conditions, prevailing conditions in Canada. You see, they somehow or the other not managed to cope up with the budgets. For some reason or the other, which also in which they are lagging behind. Maybe the system is delayed for a couple of months, and that is also when it comes to, you see, this transit between rail and transit, when it comes to with this on project, when we are talking on this
yes,
project. Is it so?
yeah. That's the case. There was just this small project to extend the subway line by 4 stations, and by
Mm-hmm.
4 stations I mean by 4 kilometers. And it cost the total cost of the project in the end was around $2 billion. So $2 billion
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of money for a municipality like Toronto to raise. Uh, for example, in Pakistan, if you're saying, okay, the IMF bailout package is going to be $1.5 billion for an entire country, you can imagine how much $2 billion is going to be for a city. So these kind of
Right.
budget constraints are some of the things that engineers have to consider with these kind of projects. That's why in a country like Canada, where there are long distances between cities, there isn't much focus on bullet trains. We are still much more focused on light rail transit
Mm.
as opposed to underground subway lines.
Yes, thank you very, very much for all this very valuable and comprehensive information. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Sabi, who just conducted this whole session beautifully. Thank you very much, Mr. Sabi. Because
No, my
हमें
pleasure.
ये जो अभी इतनी यूजफुल डिस्कशन है ये आपके साथ ही हो सकती थी, क्योंकि उसके बाद I would like to say thank you very much to Mohammed Safdar for this informative session. It is wonderful to see a seed which you plant transformed into a big shady tree. If I go back and see Safdar of grade 8 and grade 9, I can picture an honest, hard-working student who had great, bright smile to deal any kind of difficult situation.
Hello.
Hello, Ji.
Yeah, I have a question to Mr. Mohammed Safdar. It's about population increase. For example, in Pakistan's context, the population increase rate is a bit alarming. So in Canada, one can predict the population increase rate, and they can plan things accordingly. The town planning is not much affected by the factor of population. But Pakistan's context is different. So how how can we apply the Canadian paradigm in Pakistan, with keeping the factor of population increase.
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and I have a very interesting answer for that. In Canada, most of the population in recent years is concentrated in cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, more so in Toronto, and that is because of the immigration. Most of the immigrants, they just head towards Toronto because there are a lot of strong immigrant communities in that city. There are parts of towns, for example, there's Little India, which is known as Gerrard Street. In Markham, you'll have this very strong Asian community. In Richmond Hill, you'll have this very strong Persian or Irani community. So with all these communities in the city like Toronto, there was an influx of immigrants starting from 1990 until today. And the transportation planners in the 1980s and the civil engineers in the 1980s, they didn't predict this increase in the population in the city of Toronto. That's why if you ever go out on the streets of downtown Toronto during the peak traffic hours, there'll be a lot of traffic congestion. Even on the highways, which have like 8-9 driving lanes, the traffic is completely stuck for, like, you can say 5-10 minutes. Even if there's a small accident, then there's a lot of congestion. So what the engineers and transportation planners, after doing a lot of their analysis, came up with was that having more driving lanes basically is not the solution. So even in a country like Pakistan, you just need to have that basic infrastructure which can enable people to get from point A to point B. For example, if they decide to take the buses, or if they decide to take the trains, because the train track is not going to be used by the private user. If there's an increase in population, you can just increase the number of buses on a dedicated bus lane, or you can just increase the number of trains on the railway track. But you see the increase in population on the roads in terms of travelers who have their own bicycles, for example, who have their own cars. So the main focus should be providing service to the people who are using the public transit, because that way you can still help people who don't want to use the cars. And even with that kind of increase in population like it's happening in Pakistan, if there's a good state of public infrastructure, people can just save on time. There's no point of making a 1 billion rupees road for a person who's driving a Land Cruiser. So if the majority of the population is basically just using buses, or is just using rickshaws, or is just using bicycles, so the main focus should be to provide good public infrastructure facilities so that they can just save on time, and this will help with the population increase issue as well. Because if you have like I earlier said, if you have a dedicated, for example, bus lane, like with the metro buses, you can just increase the number of buses, because the only vehicle that is going to use that particular lane are going to be the buses. The population growth is going to happen no matter what we do, but we should at least have a skeleton of infrastructure which is not going to fail under the peak conditions. So that should be an engineer's main goal.
Yes, Bilal.
No, ma'am. I just shared a general knowledge. You can see that Pakistan. I wanted to show it to Safdar. It's in the public chat that Pakistan's first plastic road is paved in Islamabad to Crimea. मैं इस पे गया भी था.
Okay.
Islamabad, but मुझे feel नहीं हुआ था कि it's plastic. It was very confusing. But with the board लगा हुआ कि it's a plastic road, the first plastic road in Pakistan. So
Yeah.
I think it's a cost-effective that is why I guess they tried a plastic road, right?
Yeah, it's very cost effective.
हाँ सफदर
Yes,
जी
ma'am,
जी कंटिन्यू प्लीज आप बता रहे थे बताइए
So using plastic is very cost effective, but there are certain drawbacks. For example, if we use aggregates like the aggregates which are small rocks or bajri, like we call them in Urdu, so they are much more long lasting as compared to plastic. So although it's a very good concept, but still it will not help with the roads. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but like the only solution for having less plastic is to just completely eliminate plastic. For example, in many Canadian cities now, if you go out for shopping, you don't get a plastic bag. You have to purchase a bag made out of cloth or made out of paper. And now mostly when people go out for groceries, they just keep a bag with them. So that's the way to go. And now even we have straws that are made out of fiber, so that are biodegradable. So that's the way to go, as opposed to finding ways to store the plastic if we are still using. So if you start making roads with plastic and you're still using plastic in your daily lives, then it's not going to have any major effect
Great point.
on the environment. So the only solution is just to eliminate it completely and to divert to more biodegradable solutions.
Yeah, we actually tried to eliminate plastic, if you remember, in the COVID times. But
yes,
the love for the plastic bags in Pakistan is too much. Somehow, but
awareness.
Yeah, but in main general stores, there are no plastic bags in Lahore. But in normal shops, they still use plastic bags, and nobody's. Because once I remember, it was strictly, it was not allowed. But slowly, we lost the grip.
But another perspective on this is, in Canada, they basically gave time to all the retail stores. The time was for 15 years. I think they announced it way back that we are going to eliminate plastic bags. And I still don't think that they have gone for complete elimination until now. There's still 2 or 3 more years left. But with that time period, it actually gave time to the manufacturers to switch from plastic to other biodegradable alternatives. So in Pakistan, the bureaucracy, they just issue a decision on day one, and they say, okay, from day 2 you have to use those things, and we have to take this into consideration, that a lot of people are involved with this manufacturing industry of plastics in Pakistan. So we need to give them a little bit of time to switch to other manufacturing practices.
Excuse me, if you can hear me, may I say?
Yes,
Please.
You see, while we are discussing this plastic, the major disadvantage of its usage is that it takes tons of years to decompose by virtue of its chemical composition. This is what the general public doesn't know. I, being a chemical engineer, so I have worked on these projects also. And secondly, you see, though no doubt that producing plastic is very, very cheap, but the variety of toxic chemicals and colors which emits the chemicals, the poisonous chemicals, that is another which you see in turn creates pollution and environmental problems. And last but not the least is the recycling process for plastics. Maybe if one intends going in for plastics, then the recycling process is very, very expensive. So these are the major disadvantages, of course, in addition to what you have also said, that makes it, you see, advantageous in any way. Thank you.
Yes, is there any question? मेरा ख्याल है सब मोहम्मद सफदर से बात करना चाहते हैं, तो कोई क्वेश्चन है तो प्लीज पूछें, क्योंकि हमारा टाइम कुछ थोड़ा सा रह गया है खत्म होने वाला.
Yes, ma'am. I think let's wrap up.
Let's wrap up. Okay.
Yes, it was an amazing session.
This wonderful session.
जी, बहुत knowledgeable है.
मेरा ख्याल है सफदर से पूछते हैं कि कोई any points जो हमें जाते जाते वो देना चाहते हैं. Any key takeaways. जी जी.
So the key takeaways, I think, from the session are, मुझे काफ़ी अच्छा लगा कि जब ऑडियंस ने ये सारे क्वेश्चंस मेरे से किए. I think in Pakistan we need to focus more on active transportation, things like cycling, because these things, they are not only good for our health, but they are good for the environment as well. And if the educated community, if learned people, they ask the government for facilities like unidirectional bicycle lanes, for good public infrastructure like like metro lines or subway lines. Basically, these things will not only be good for the health of our cities, but they'll be good for the overall environment of our country as well. So with a country like Pakistan, where we import most of our fuel, it's good to have a good public infrastructure system, and this system can only come if there's a pushback from the public. So we need to spread awareness of this topic, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Safdar.
It's wonderful session. और मैं सफदर के लिए कहना चाहती हूँ कि सबको ये बताना चाहती हूँ कि जो ऑनेस्टी है वो क्लैरिटी बनाती है, और सफदर की ऑनेस्टी और उसका हार्ड वर्किंग होना ने उसको इतनी क्लैरिटी दी कि अभी मैं उसको जैसे वो चीज़ों को रिलेट करके अप्लाई करने पे ट्रांसफॉर्म होते हुए अभी मैंने उसको देखा है. तो ये एक बहुत अच्छी बात थी. और सबसे अच्छी बात जो सेशन में मुझे जो स्टार्ट किया जिसने, जो सफदर ने, मैं तो सिविल इंजीनियर नहीं हूँ, लेकिन मुझे बात समझ में आई कि द मोस्ट इंस्पायरिंग थिंग इन दिस प्रेजेंटेशन ये थी कि जो इन्होंने कही इज ह्यूमन स्टोरी टू डिजाइन, एंड पर्पस है कि दे आर कंसिडरिंग सेफ्टी, और सेफ्टी को जहन में रखते हुए सारी जो डिजाइनिंग है, हम खुदा करे अल्लाह करे हम भी केपेबल हों कि हम ये काम कर सकें, कि हमारे पास पर्पस हो फॉर एनीथिंग जो हम करने जा रहे हैं. और बहुत अच्छी बात ये कि जब आप कोई डिसीजन बनाते हैं तो उससे जुड़े हुए लोगों को, उनके प्रॉब्लम्स को रिजॉल्व करने के बारे में पहले कंसिडर करें, इससे पहले कि डिसीजन पास करें. ये भी सफदर के प्रेजेंटेशन में, डिस्कशन में मैंने देखा कि सफदर के पास इंटेलेक्ट भी है और विजडम भी है, और हम सारे जो है ना फॉर्चुनेट इनफ कि हमें आज सफदर से बात करने को मिला. Thank you very much.
No doubt, ma'am.
All audience, thank you very much. We enjoyed a lot. Okay, ji.
Thank you, ma'am. Mia Zahiduddin says I enjoyed the session a lot. Got plenty of new information and concepts. Thank you all.
Thank
So,
you. और
thank you.
और एक आखिरी बात मैंने ये कहनी थी कि सफदर जो है वो हमारे कम्युनिटी मेंबर रहेंगे. इट्स एन ऑर्डर. कहाँ है मोहम्मद सफदर?
इंशाल्लाह.
ठीक है जी, क्योंकि एवरी थर्सडे हमारा सेशन होता है, तो हम चाहते हैं कि इतना एक्टिव, इतना ब्रिलियंट मेंबर हमें मिला रहे, जैसे सभी साहब हमारे पास हैं. और यहाँ पे बहुत सारे लोग जो इस वक्त मौजूद हैं, दे आर रिमार्केबल. तो हमें आप चाहिए अपने हर सेशन में.
Yes, do come in the next session, Thursday, 7 p.m., same time, same day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Safdar ma'am, Mr. Sabi, and everyone. Take care. Khuda Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.